May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Luke's gospel today reflects the maybe more familiar words of Matthew, the Beatitudes. But Luke includes in his gospel the woes, the flip side of the blessed are. So I want to just back up a little bit and share what happens just before this passage. In verse 12, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated as apostles. And also in verse 17, a large crowd of his disciples were there, and a great number of people from all over Judea who had come to hear him and be healed of their diseases. So there were in fact 3 audiences for Jesus' sermon. The first audience is the crowd. They wanted to hear what Jesus says, but first and foremost, they wanted to be healed. The Bible tells us that Jesus healed them all. The second audience is the disciples. These are the people who have followed Jesus. They not only want to hear what he says, they also wanted and needed to learn from him. By Jesus' teachings, they want to change their way of thinking and living to be made more in line with the will of God. And the third audience are the newly appointed 12 apostles. All apostles were also disciples, but not all disciples were apostles. These 12 were handpicked by Jesus to be his emissaries, to continue to do his work, the work that he had begun. So each audience is listening to this sermon on the plain with different purposes, different levels of buy-in. The crowd was likely listening for what they needed to be healed. The disciples were listening more closely. They were trying to understand Jesus' teachings and apply them to their own lives. And the apostles are listening the most intently because they are also looking at Jesus' action as well as hearing his words, trying to figure out how to do what he did in the world. So I believe in each community there are these 3 audiences. Maybe even further, an understanding would be that there might be each of these audiences in us, depending on the time. For me, I did come to church for quite a while just to be healed. That was all I could do. I took what I needed each Sunday and started to feel better. I have spent also a long time as a disciple, trying to understand and bend my actions to lead a more Christian life. And finally now, I guess, as an apostle, trying to go all in on preaching. But whichever audience people were in, Jesus continues to proclaim the good news. Interestingly, in Luke's gospel, Jesus uses the word you. Blessed are you who are poor. Rather than in Matthew's gospel, blessed are the poor in spirit. Luke is more personal and direct. Jesus focuses on the conditions in which people find themselves: poverty, sorrow, hunger, and marginalization. In Luke's gospel, Jesus prophesies that lives will be changed if we believe in him and pay attention to the Spirit. He has promised a glorious future when his teachings are actually realized. Also in Luke's gospel, different than Matthew's, is that Jesus proclaims the woes, the flip side. Woe to you who are rich, and woe to you who are well-fed now. This is not, I think, a rejection of wealth or adequate food, but instead a warning. A warning that those with much will be expected to live differently. The rich to share their wealth, those with food to share with the hungry. And in the final section of today's reading, we have the words, "Love your enemies and do unto others as you would have done to you." This was very counterculture. A person's status at the time was very tied to their ability to exert control over others. I'm not sure it's any less countercultural or provocative today. Love your enemies? How can we even imagine that today? Whether in our war-torn world, within our neighborhoods, families, or even churches, this is not a comfortable path. We prioritize our own comfort, avoid conflict. We expect to see retaliation if someone is harmed. But where does that cycle lead? What would happen if we really did love our enemies? Jesus' sermon challenged all three audiences listening to think and live differently. It challenges us now, who are committed to following his teachings, to think and live differently, to include and share radical hospitality to those who are poor, marginalized, othered, to share our privilege with those in our community, and to love our enemies. A topsy-turvy countercultural life for sure. Amen.